sort of been sleepwalking through life in many ways for the last decade or 2 decades. And now we're asking ourselves, what does it actually mean to be human? And how do I want to spend my life? Do I want to spend 8 hours a day, 5, 6, 7 days a week interacting with a robot? Or do I want to spend time with my hands in the dirt? Do I want to spend time training for a marathon IRL in real life, in the real world? Do I want to be sitting down and eating real food? What does it actually mean to be real? And I believe we have a world right now that's dominated by algorithms, automation, and artificial everything. And there's a return to real movement taking shape in the world where people are yearning artisanal, they're yearning analog, and they're yearning authentic. And therein lies the opportunity. For those of us who are entrepreneurs, who are marketers, we can deliver what the world actually wants, what the world is actually craving.
Welcome to the AI Grapple podcast. I'm Kate VanderVoort, founder and CEO of Social Mediology and the AI Success Lab. Today, I am genuinely thrilled to introduce someone who has deeply influenced the way that I approach my work and my career. Ryan Levesque is a 7-time Inc. 5000 CEO and 2-time #1 national best-selling author who's generated over $100 million in revenue and successfully sold 2 of his companies. His insights have graced the pages of the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Entrepreneur, and NBC News, just to name a few. These days, Ryan advises multiple businesses, is working on his next book, and shares unconventional wisdom weekly in his popular newsletter, The Digital Contrarian. In today's candid and thought-provoking conversation, Ryan and I explore some critical and lesser discussed realities of AI. We explore the ethical complexities of using AI to replicate human expertise, discuss what it means to be truly authentic in an AI-saturated world, and unpack the hidden risks that AI poses to businesses, careers, and entire industries. Ryan shares powerful insights about how entrepreneurs and thought leaders can remain relevant, human, and impactful even as technology transforms every aspect of our lives. Prepare to be inspired, challenged, and equipped with a fresh perspective on what it takes to thrive and connect meaningfully in our rapidly changing world. Let's dive in. Ryan, welcome to the podcast. It is so great to have you here today.
Kate, it's so great to be here.
Now, listen, Ryan, you've built incredible businesses and influenced thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs, all without AI until recently. So can you take us through your journey so far and maybe what's made your approach so successful to date?
It's a great question. I reflect on this often. I've been thinking a lot about the nature of luck. And I think, first and foremost, I think we as human beings have a natural tendency to take credit when things go really right. And when things go wrong, we attribute it to bad luck. And I think there's a bit of a balance that we need to acknowledge. And so I think part of it was the success that we were able to have in our business. So certainly I chalk it up to timing, being in the right industry, taking advantage of the right mega trends and being in the right place at the right time. And of course, hard work and all that stuff as well. At the highest level, we built a training and education business that was really centered around this methodology I developed called the ASK method. And the ASK method, for anyone not familiar, is a methodology for understanding your audience at a deep emotional level. It's a marketing methodology. And it's a methodology that uses a combination of surveys and quizzes to both understand your audience as a market research tool and also to generate leads in the form of assessments, questionnaires, quiz funnels, and so on and so forth. So we built a very successful 8-figure training and education business. And then we also built a very successful software business that was the technology for implementing this methodology. And last year, we were very fortunate that our software business was acquired. So we were able to sell our software business. And in that process, as you and I were talking offline a bit, it's given me an opportunity to maybe take a step back and thinking about this next mountain, the second mountain of life, where I want to focus my time and attention and energy. And that's led us to this conversation right here. So very excited for today.
I am incredibly excited for this conversation. And I do have to share that, Ryan and I have met before, and I was reflecting before our conversation. I think it was 2017, and I was deep in the thick of running, my social media business and talking a lot about the hyper personalization, which wasn't a word I actually was using at that time, of content with social media. So how do we create content that our audience feels like we're speaking directly to them? And I think it was just like an ad on Facebook or something, but you popped up in my feed, and here you were putting a framework and a methodology around exactly what I was trying to achieve with social media and growing and building customer communities. And without talking to my family, without doing anything else, really, I booked flights to Vegas to come to Ask Live. And that event and what transpired afterwards by being a part of your coaching programs literally changed the trajectory of my career and of my professional life. And you gave me a framework and language and a way to really describe and teach people how to do what it is that you have been doing. And so thank you, firstly, from the bottom of my heart, because you are one of the most influential people in terms of how it is that I approach my work. And so when you agreed to be on the podcast, I had a secret fangirl moment, because you're someone, you probably don't know most of this, but you're someone who's been very influential in my career and my professional life. So thank you. I'm also very excited about this conversation.
Just made my day. You've warmed my heart, and I'm so appreciative of that. And I'm so glad that you decided to throw caution to the wind and click on that Facebook ad and come to Las Vegas. And we had opportunity to meet and work together. And it's so cool to see how you've taken what you were doing then, sort of, pre-AI. It's almost like we've got this line that's, in the sand, pre-AI, post-AI, and how you have evolved your business post-AI, and excited for our conversation.
Yeah, I had an 18-month-old at home. It wasn't an easy, it wasn't an easy trip to organize, but there was just something in what you were saying that I just knew that was the next step in my professional journey. And yes, I haven't looked back. So I'm very grateful for that. So Ryan, I saw a Facebook post that you did, which was talking about some of the ways that you're looking at and thinking about AI. So we're going to go into some of that in more detail. But how are you currently using AI? How has AI changed your work, or how your team maybe use that in your business? And has it changed your work?
I think for all of us, it's changed my work certainly in a profound way. And like we could take this as deep as we want to take it. I'll give a few examples, a few for instances. So historically, to implement the methodology that I've been teaching for years, the Ask methodology, the Ask method, it's involved analyzing vast amounts of open-ended feedback that you get in response to certain questions, like asking people, what's your biggest challenge or frustration that you're having around this issue? And sort of synthesizing that open-ended natural consumer feedback that you get, and identifying different themes and trends, and doing things like cluster analysis, which is a very time-consuming exercise. Even if you have a background in advanced statistics to be able to do that type of work, it is hours and hours and hours of work. Now, fast forward to today, and we can use Notebook LM, we can use ChatGPT, we can use Grok, we can use any of the tools available today to take that data set and upload it and say, please perform cluster analysis to identify the different groups of people I should be focused on. What are the biggest trends that you're seeing? Pay close attention to the most emotionally driven language and what is showing up. These are all things that, I can say this in a matter of seconds, that would have taken days, if not weeks, of work and analysis to tease out these insights. Now we can tease these insights out in a matter of seconds. So like, that's just one way that, my world has changed profoundly. On the other side of the equation, I would say one thing that I've been sort of unapologetic about is that I believe that and I made a big shift in my business, which you and I may not have talked about, in 2024, middle of the year, I sort of had this moment where I just felt more and more uncomfortable with the fact that my name was being attached to all sorts of content we were creating in our business that I didn't have a personal hand in creating myself. Yes, this content was based on my ideas and things that I may have said or an interview that I may have done, but the content itself wasn't something that I personally wrote. And I decided to write an email to my audience, and I called it an embarrassing confession. And effectively what I said was this. I said, look, I have an embarrassing confession to make. And effectively for the last 7 years, every single piece of content that you've seen with my name attached to it wasn't written by me. It wasn't penned by me personally, but it was penned by a team of writers that we had writing in my voice and taking my ideas and putting them out there in the world. And I said, I've made a decision from this day forward that anytime you see something with my name attached to it, you will have the confidence to know that I've personally written it myself. And ever since then, I've been writing a weekly email to my audience, personally penned by me, no AI, no team of writers, that I actually spend far more time than I maybe even care to admit that it takes me to do this, with deep ideas and personal reflections and lessons learned and wisdom gained. And I can tell you, Kate, in the 6 months or so since I started doing this, I've had more opportunity come my way than probably in the last 6 years, simply based on the fact that, as I wrote in one of these pieces, I believe that once the world tastes the equivalent of the freshly squeezed Sunday brunch orange juice version of you, the watered down version that comes in a can is not going to cut it. And that's what most of the world is putting out there in the world when they rely on AI to put their ideas out there. It's not the real, authentic, freshly squeezed Sunday brunch variety of orange juice. It's the watered down version in a can that lacks the energy signature that we all convey and that we can feel when someone with a real beating heart puts out an idea, puts out a piece of content, puts out a message where it resonates with you and it actually makes you feel. And I believe that when it comes to AI is amazing at a lot of things as a thought partner, as a research partner. But when it comes to actually putting out an authentic expression of what it is that you believe, that AI currently in its current form, and of course it's evolving very quickly, falls short. And therein lies the opportunity. Therein lies the opportunity for every single one of us that chooses to lean into this, to have our authentic voice heard and seen and received in the market, where it truly stands out, where we can truly be that freshly squeezed Sunday brunch version of orange juice in a sea of watered down orange juice coming from a can.
Oh, I love that. And we will put the link to your newsletter, because I had an internal chuckle as you were saying that. Saturday mornings is when I get to slow down and read a lot of what comes out of the US on Fridays. It's our Saturday morning. And your email is at the top of my things to read. And you're 100% right. As a reader of your email, I slow down and I engage with what you're writing in a way that I just don't with 99% of what else I read. You know, everything else I'm skimming, it's quick. I'm just trying to get the cliff notes. But the way that you write and the process that you obviously go through to do that, you can feel it as a reader. It's a completely different experience. And it's one of the things absolutely that we're focused on at the moment is, where are the places people are going to continue to authentically show up? Because in a lot of ways, people are going to resist AI and start to feel quite differently about it. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But the other thing I wanted to say about what you just said is, one of the things we do at our coaching program is run customer focus groups using AI. So developing the persona or the avatar and getting them to have conversations about a product, about a service. And I always think of you when we do that, because I remember doing the deep dive survey with 200 recipients. And it's not the same level of insight by any means, but it's a great quick way for people to do that. Now, you also touched on another bit about acting as Ryan Levesque, and I literally on the weekend saw an email come through from an AI influencer who shared a prompt, and the prompt said, word for word, I want you to act as Ryan Levesque
and create a quiz funnel. And it went on and on to talk about you. And it was asking AI to emulate you. How do you feel? I mean, it's your team doing that is one thing because you're endorsing that by hiring them. How do you feel about the rest of the world potentially, using AI to emulate Ryan Levesque?
It's so tough, right? It's easy to say, feel resentful and it's unfair. And I think, OpenAI, it's widely known, of course, that it's, built an entire large language model on the back of content that's effectively stolen from content creators, authors, thought leaders, researchers, million times over. And if it were to fairly compensate those content creators, that OpenAI would not exist in its current form. It just could not afford to do what it's done. Building its entire technology platform on the back of free labor. And but this isn't the first time in history that something like that has happened. And I'm not going to even dream to equate this or compare this to something like slavery, where we have just millions upon millions of people who were unfairly treated for hundreds of years and never compensated for the free labor that provided. We have experience historically that shows that what can happen when we have these shifts. So, like, for example, I've been studying historically what's happened in these periods of fast movement. And we have, for example, times in history like the Industrial Revolution, which was met with this resistance known as the Romantic period. The Romantic ideas, Romanticism, was a response to the Industrial Revolution. One of the greatest thinkers in the American Romantic movement is Henry David Thoreau, who wrote Walden and really wrote in response to that. When we look at the mechanization about a century later that was taking place in much of the world, we had the arts and crafts movement that was in response to that. In the 20th century, we had the homesteading movement, and later the slow living movement, and then we've got the digital minimalism movement. So we've got history as a guide to sort of give us a sense for what the response is likely to be when we have this fast moving technological shift in front of us. And you've got a few different approaches that you can take. You can resist it. You can complain about it, or you can accept it and understand that the rules of the game have changed. Now, to answer your direct question about, people lifting your IP and using it in a way that you're not fairly compensated, what are you going to do about it, right? Like, what are your options? Are you going to just, it's not fair and, file a lawsuit against, the open AIs of the world? And is that what you want your daily existence to be? Or do you just recognize, all right, these are the rules of the game? But here's what AI does not know. AI does not know the thought that's going on in my brain right now. It does not know that much of the thinking that I had that AI is leveraging right now is obsolete. It's old. It's based on a paradigm that no longer necessarily applies. So I believe that's an opportunity, that AI cannot replicate the thoughts that we have in our brain right now and where we're going. AI can only take what's been documented and what's out there in the world. So what does that do? As thought leaders, as truth tellers, as creatives, it forces us to constantly evolve. It forces us to be thinking about what's going to happen next. And in a world that's moving faster than it ever has been moving, I think it's never been more important to cultivate an attitude of holding deeply held beliefs very softly, not tightly, not firmly, because the world is shifting so quickly. And I think that's the kiss of death. When you say, all right, this is what I believe. I believe a quiz funnel should be organized like this, and it's never going to change. Okay, great. Well, you've kind of made yourself obsolete because AI can come in and take, right, that thinking exists in this static way. It's not dynamic. It's not evolving. This is what it is. So now AI can replace what it is that you do. But in a fast evolving world, there's tremendous opportunity to think about how whatever work you do, whether it's a quiz funnel or social media work, how that's evolving over time. So do I love it? No, but what's the alternative? Go in a cave somewhere and complain about it, cry about it, and hide in a hole? it's happening to everybody, right? It's not just myself. It's everyone. It's Seth Godin. It's Tim Ferriss. It's anybody that you study or follow is having to deal with these new rules of engagement. So create a new body of work, create new evolved thinking to stay relevant, number one, and to continue to thrive in this new world that we live in.
Yeah, I've read some of the things that you've written around kind of the difference between old world gurus and new world thought leaders. And you've already touched on some of the ways that thought leaders and experts, guess in their field, could be approaching things or doing things differently to build influence in the current AI landscape. Have you got any other reflections or thoughts on how people can do that?
In terms of how to just elaborate on the question a bit more so I can respond.
Well, I guess people like yourself or those of us who are, at the forefront of what we're doing, how do you remain relevant? And you've already talked about that authenticity and staying agile, I guess. But for some people, they've built their entire business on a particular way. As you say, what else could they be doing to thrive in the AI landscape rather than make themselves redundant?
Well, I think there's another axis that is important to be thinking about, and it's this axis of trust. We live in this world where currently the default state of the world is distrust. There's an organization, there's a think tank that has put out something called the Edelman Trust Barometer for the last 25 years. And it's a measurement of the level of trust that exists in the world. And it's no surprise that trust is at an all-time low in the last 25 years since this has actively been measured. And so what can we learn from that? Well, what we can learn from that is that at the end of the day, people increasingly are making decisions based on not the message, but the messenger. And what I mean by that is who we're taking advice from is as important, if not more important than the advice itself. Can I trust this person who's on the other side of this message? So how do we build trust? And I've written about this extensively. I think there are three key ingredients, right? Three key ingredients to build trust. People need to see your heart, they need to see your humor, and they need to see your humanity. And what I mean by that is people need to see that you are a human being that actually cares. They need to feel that at a visceral level. They need to feel at the end of the day that you're a good person. Humor. They need to see that you can laugh about yourself. Like you don't take yourself too seriously. You're just a normal person that they would, connect with in person, IRL, not just URL, right? So in person, not just over the internet. And last but not least, humanity. And when I say humanity, what I mean by that is sharing the struggles that you've had in your life, the challenges. And I wrote a piece that was deeply personal a few months ago, and I titled it The Oscillation Between Self-Loathing and Self-Love. And it was a moment, Kate, where I was having a real tough time. It was before the transaction where we sold our software business, Bucket, to what ultimately was our number one competitor in the marketplace, a company called ScoreApp, a UK-based assessment technology business. It was before that happened, and I'd reached this low. Like I'd reached this, I don't know, I was feeling the sense of, I don't know if it was depression, I don't know what it was, but I can tell you what it felt like. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to talk to my wife. I didn't want to talk to my kids. I was saying like 10 words a day. I just wanted to be by myself. And I was having a real tough time. And we live on a farm in the U.S. state of Vermont, which is the northeast corner of the state in New England, not too far from Canada. So it's very cold in the winter. It's lots of snow in the winter, and very green in the summer. And we have pastures on our property, and we have a herd of cattle. And if I had the photo, I'd share this photo in this moment. But for some reason, I felt drawn to wanting to walk out and be with the cattle. I felt like I needed like a serotonin hit. And I walked out to the pastures and I got down on one knee and I just started crying. I just started bawling my eyes out. I was just like a total mess. And out of nowhere, one of the yearling cows, a heifer came up to me, whose name is Athena, one of the most shy in our herd. She came up to me never would come up to another human being like this. And as I'm crying with my hands in my head, down on one knee, she starts rubbing her face all over me. She starts rubbing her neck on me and she's pushing me around. And then, Kate, before I knew it, I was covered in cow boogers, cow mucus. And it was like Slimer from Ghostbusters. It was just like all over my face. I'm like, this is disgusting. And I went from crying my eyes out to laughing, just laughing. I just thought how ridiculous I must have felt in that moment. And I cleaned myself off. I came back inside and I wrote a piece that both told this story. And I said in this piece, in between this oscillation of self-loathing and self-love, there's a space of acceptance. And that it's not always going to be easy. There are going to be times when you feel like this, but this is the full spectrum of the human existence. And when we stop being so busy and we actually slow down long enough to take a moment to just feel, that's what it means to be human. And I shared this piece, and it was deeply personal. It was something that I originally wrote just for myself, and then I said, no, I want to share this story because people just see the highlight reel. They don't see the low light reel, the real reel, as I call it, right? And this piece was deeply personal to me, and it was a vulnerable moment that I shared with tremendous transparency. So the question that I often pose to my students is, what's a tender moment in your life that you could share that demonstrates deep vulnerability and transparency to build a level of trust with your audience? Not in a strategic way, not in a manipulative way, but to let the people who care about what you care about know that you're a deeply flawed human being just like them, where they can relate to you on a level that they're never going to relate to a robot or AI or computer. That's how I believe those of us who are in this tension, I believe the truth is in the tension with AI. It's yes and. It's not discard AI, be a Luddite, and just, live in a world made by hand. It's also not race to the bottom and commoditize what it is that you do by trying to AI everything that you create. The truth is somewhere in the middle. And I believe there is space, and the world is craving this. The world is craving this type of real and raw response. And when you do this and you put yourself out there, people say, I want to do business with her because she is someone that I believe in. She's someone that I trust. So that's how I would respond to that question. I know we could have taken it in so many different directions. Heart, humor, humanity.
Oh, I love that. And thank you very much for being willing to share that story. I had a vision of you then telling that story to your boys, which I'm sure was a lovely moment of reconnection.
It was.
They would have loved the cow boogers. And yes, most of the people in my community and in my courses are women over 40, and we talk about that a lot, about that being willing to be authentic and vulnerable. And I think, not to make it a gender issue, but you don't see as many men being willing to do that. And you're right, it speaks to you and touches you in a way that is a human connection because, I always say don't compare your insides to other people's outsides because you never really know what's going on for them. I want to take that question one more step because that's a great way to look at it for an individual. How do brands manage that during this time, in your view? Because one of the things I'm starting to see is the pendulum's already starting to swing. And as you say, the default mechanism is distrust. And I think customers, particularly people who've been impacted by AI, if they've lost their job, if they've had some kind of negative experience with AI, they're not going to want to work with brands where all their customer service is AI and there's no humanity in that. So how do you suggest brands navigate this time and find that balance, I guess, between being human-centered, being customer-centric, being focused on the people in their business, as opposed to AI-ifying everything?
That's a great question. My thinking on this is certainly still evolving, but I do have some thoughts. I think I'm certainly a believer that AI has a place in most businesses, probably all businesses in some way, shape, or form. And it's a matter of using AI as a way to get leverage that gives you more bandwidth to do the things that AI should not be doing and is really not equipped to be doing. So, I'll give you an example. I believe AI as a tool for very perfunctory informational writing is excellent. So writing SOPs and things like that, it's excellent. It's not designed as writing that's designed to connect you with your audience, which is the example that I was just sharing a moment ago. Customer service, same thing. So AI is great at being able to give a knowledge-based answer 24 hours a day for something, but it's not necessarily equipped when a customer is having a difficult situation and they're being abdicated to AI to respond to that situation. In many ways, people want to feel seen, heard, and understood. And by putting an AI in front of someone, let's say in customer service, an AI agent that's responding, even if it may be more efficient in being able to respond in that moment, if the inquiry comes in after business hours, it leaves people feeling like this company doesn't care. And even though empirically it's providing the response in the moment, which you think, okay, isn't that better customer service? Because it lacks a soul, if you want to use that language, it's going to leave your customers feeling that your brand doesn't care. So it's those are two examples of finding the right places. Free your writers up away from writing SOPs, which AI can do a great job, so it can write more moving, emotionally driven writing that's designed to connect with your readers or your audience. Take your customer service team and use AI to respond to the knowledge-based type inquiries that it's going to do a better job of doing. But when it comes time to deal with a really difficult, hairy, thorny situation with a client where they want their situation to be heard, put a human in that place. Don't put AI in that place. So I think, there are principles that are emerging around this that I believe are going to help guide our decision-making in terms of where we use and insert and slot AI in our business. AI should not be a tool to replace the humanity. It should not be a tool that we're attempting to replace the humanity. The things that I think are a total mistake is anything where we're not using AI with disclosure. What I mean by that is if you are using AI and you're using it and you're proud about the fact that my customers don't even know that they're talking to AI, that is a super slippery slope. Because as soon as someone finds out that they were interacting with a robot and not an actual real life human being, if it was presented, that interaction was presented as being from another real life human being, the worst thing that you can do in business is to make somebody else feel foolish. It's the worst thing that you can do. You've got making people lose money. You've got making people look foolish. And then you've got making people feel foolish. People feel shame when they feel foolish. The last thing that you want to do is associate your brand or your company with a feeling of shame. That's a kiss of death. So anything that you do with AI, I believe should be done with disclosure. When it comes to writing, anytime that I write something and I'm pulling from ChatGPT, I quote ChatGPT or Google or Claude or whatever tool I might be referencing. I quote it no different than if I were quoting Wikipedia or another source. To make it in full disclosure, I'll say, hey, I asked ChatGPT, can you please summarize this concept? And this is what ChatGPT came up with. And then I provide my commentary. And people appreciate that. They feel respected as opposed to taking something that ChatGPT wrote, lifted it up, maybe make a few minor tweaks to it, and then say, hey, here's what I wrote. It's taking credit for something that didn't come from you. And I think it's a very dangerous, slippery slope. So I'll pause there. I'm sure we could go deeper on this topic, but those are a few thoughts on how to decide where you're drawing the line on where to inject a human and where to inject a robot.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And we get approached on the daily from companies who are doing exactly that. They exist to dupe customers into not knowing that AI is actually powering whatever the engagement process is. And I feel really uncomfortable about that as well. And I think the next few years, if not decades, but definitely the next few years, are going to be really bumpy. We're going to see companies lay off whole workforces and then completely regret that decision and want to bring them back again. And I think it's going to be a roller coaster as we go through that process. So if we start to think about job displacement and whole industries, I know this is one of the reasons I reached out to you, was seeing a particular post that you wrote about whole industries being disrupted by AI, and with the very obvious job loss at the first level. And that's, I'm not even sure that people are fully thinking about what that means yet. But you were talking about some of the second and third order effects of what AI is going to mean for us. And I don't hear a lot of those conversations happening, which is why I was really keen to have this conversation with you. So talk to us about some of those hidden risks of AI disruption.
Yeah, I think there is a discussion that I'm surprised is not taking place online. Certainly to the degree that I would expect it to be taking place, and it sort of it's akin to this. So I think about over a century ago in the United States, Ford Motor Company, Henry Ford, very famous Henry Ford, insisted that his factory workers on the floor were paid a wage that would allow them to be able to purchase the product that they were building. And I just can't help but think that all these companies that are necessarily shifting to use AI to be competitive in their space, because if their competitor is doing it, they're forced to compete in order to operate in that competitive space. If Google is laying off 25,000 workers, and just as an example, and you take car company X, and you take consumer products company Y, and you take all these different companies, and they're laying off their workers at a clip. Who are the consumers to buy those products? If Henry Ford, for example, 100 plus years ago, had said, you know what, we can build these cars, we don't need any humans at all. We're just going to use machines to build these humans. There wouldn't have been a consumer base to purchase the product that he was creating. So you just think about this, not at a small scale, but a mass scale, right? So if all these companies are laying off, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of workers, and these are workers that aren't low-skilled, low-wage workers. These are high-skill, high-wage, in many cases, white-collar workers. These are radiologists who are earning six figures right now. These are doctors, medical doctors that spent 10 to 12 years in medical education. They've foregone a decade plus of earnings in order to go through this process and become a radiologist, for example. And then all of a sudden they find out, all right, AI is going to be able to do your job. We don't need you anymore. And oh, by the way, we know that you are $300,000 to $400,000 in medical school and undergraduate student debt right now. Good luck finding another profession that's not going to take you another 10 years to retrain to pay off that medical school debt. Like, what happens when we start seeing that? Lawyers, same thing. We found it in even in our business, where we used to be paying lawyers, $400 or $500 an hour to draft up agreements, draft up contracts. We don't need to pay lawyers to do that anymore. We can go to ChatGPT and say, hey, can you give us an agreement, a contract? Here's what we need. And it gets it 90% of the way there, as opposed to, paying an attorney $400 or $500 an hour to do that. That's happening. Multiply that out over every company in every country around the world, and every contract and every agreement. All of a sudden, there are going to be a lot of lawyers that are out of work. And these are lawyers who are spending money at the very companies that are employing AI right now as consumers. So that piece that I wrote, The Coming Collapse, was really a piece coming from curiosity. It's not a doom and gloom piece. It's sort of like, okay, where does this end? Like, where do the dominoes stop falling? Because let's say we've got all these companies displacing workers. It drives up unemployment. Who is actually safe at that point? Are any of us safe? Or are we destined to have an economy that's dominated by a very small handful of trillionaire technocrat leaders, Elon Musks of the world, that have net worths that balloon up to multiple trillions of dollars? And even those of us that have, 7 and 8 figure businesses, we effectively become a peasant class where we're not able to operate. We're not able to thrive. We're not able to be successful. Where does it so where does it end? And for those of us who are investors, you think, okay, I'm safe. I've saved for my retirement. I've invested. What about the companies that you've invested in? Your retirement plan, the insurance policies that you've invested in that have underlying investments in safe blue chip entities, right? S&P 500. If these companies, if their stock prices start to nosedive because their revenues start to drop because there are no consumers to buy their products, even pensioners, retirees, investors who have put their net worth in these assets, they're not immune from this either. So I just can't help but think that there must be a reckoning coming at some point, unless this shift and the change happens slowly enough and in a small enough way that we have enough time to adapt. We don't know. The big question that we don't know, is this going to disrupt 100 million jobs in 6 months? Or is it 10 million jobs over 5 years? There is going to be disruption. I think the only thing that's up for debate right now is the scale, the order of magnitude that this is going to take place, and the pace at which this happens. But I, for one, am a long-term optimist, but in many ways, a short-term realist. I don't necessarily think of myself as a pessimist. I'm just a short-term realist. And so I think about, what are the opportunities in this place? Well, I think this is where the zig when they zag sort of contrarian philosophy that I sort of live my life by shows up. So if everybody in the world is moving in this direction, right? And we've got this Ouroboros situation, which is the snake eating its own tail. Like, if you've ever seen that diagram, if all these companies are basically, they're unintentionally, unknowingly, basically eating their own tail. They're swallowing themselves whole by making this shift. And it's not because they're doing it unintelligently. They're doing it out of necessity because that's what the competition is doing. So it's just this capitalistic force that's just moving the world forward in this direction. If everything is moving in that direction, where is the opportunity going to be? And I believe it's human connection. I believe it's localized, resilient community, not just online community, but localized, resilient community. I believe it's a movement towards commodity investing. So there will be commodities that are going to be incredibly valuable, even if the companies themselves are disrupted. The underlying natural resources that power capitalism on this planet, that's not going away. We still are going to need precious metals and timber and water and food production. Those elements, as long as we are a species on this planet, are going to be needed. So I believe there will be industries that are more sheltered from this shift, but I think it's going to be a pretty big disruption that we face. And I think we are in store for some tough times, some hard times. And so mentally, physically, what I'm preparing for right now is what those hard times may be. I'm preparing my kids for the fact that there may be some hard times. Kate, you and I have lived in a time of world peace, virtually no world wars at a global scale. We have not known what it means to experience hard times in our lives. For the most part, for those of us who have lived in the developed Western world in the last 40, 50, 60 years, we have not known what it means to feel this. Now, you can be frightened by this, you can be terrified by this, or you just lean into it and just accept it and say, all right, I can do hard things. I've done hard things before, and I can do this. So I think in many ways that mental and physical resiliency is going to be absolutely essential as we enter in what may be a tumultuous decade, perhaps, in front of us.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt this is the greatest shift maybe that humanity's ever seen. I mean, we keep likening it to things like electricity and the Industrial Revolution, but this is happening at a speed and a scale that I'm not sure humanity has seen before. And I don't you're absolutely right. I don't think people see what's coming at all. Some of the conversations that have started to happen are around taxing companies that replace their workforces with AI, and this concept of potentially universal basic income or paying people for the time that they've lost due to AI. What are your thoughts around those sort of solutions that are being thrown around?
So it's an area that I'm studying with great interest. And here's the reason why. What we don't know is what are the wide scale impacts and influences of UBI across a global economy. The only experimentation that we as a species, as a society, have performed to date have been very isolated experiments. It hasn't been an entire nation of consequence. I think Iran is a country that has implemented a small scale UBI, but no country like the United States or the EU or Japan or China has implemented UBI at a countrywide scale. And so what I'm very curious about is not just the economic theory, but empirically what we actually see when it comes to the impact on the price of products and services and goods. Like what is that impact when everybody has this new floor of, whatever the amount of money is, $1,000 a month, just to pick an arbitrary number. Do the price of goods, does it go up? Does the government have to step in and put price caps on certain commodity products? How do we determine what those are? So I think there's so many unanswered questions around it. I think this idea of redistribution of wealth and taxing the multi-trillion-dollar tech companies and the trillion-dollar technocrats that are at the head of these companies and redistributing that wealth is probably in the cards. What does that look like? I think there's going to be a lot of debate. There are going to be a lot of disagreements around that for sure, if that is something that is considered seriously. We're entering into very much uncharted territory, like very, very much uncharted territory. And your guess is as good as mine. Like I don't, pretend to have any of the answers, but I have a lot of questions, and I've got deep curiosity around where we're headed and where this might take us.
Absolutely. And, that's why I wanted to have the conversation with you, because you're clearly thinking about these things, which a lot of people haven't quite started yet. They're still having their shiny moment with GPT.
The level of gap is amazing. I recently went on a trip, and I was in a coach, a bus, and I was sitting and I was using ChatGPT to do a project that I was working on. And I just overheard the two gentlemen that were sitting in the seat behind me. And one gentleman asked the other one, I don't know if it was in response to seeing me on my computer and like the crack between the seats, or if it was just happenstance. And he said, are you doing any work with ChatGPT? Do you do that with in your business or anything like that? And the other one said, I don't even really know what ChatGPT is. Like, I'm not quite sure. And I'm looking and I'm like, is this person like 100 years old behind me? And no, it was someone our age, was not that old. I mean, it wasn't a kid, but it was a middle-aged person. And I thought to myself, on this bus, if there are 100 seats on this bus, I'm very curious where we sit in terms of like the level of sophistication and understanding around this. Are we in the, if there's 100 seats, are we in the top 2 seats, the top 10 seats, the top 50 seats? I think much of the world has no idea, to your point, at what's coming. And much of the world is approaching this from a place of fear and trepidation. And that which we don't understand, we typically approach with a lot of fear. So there's a lot of fear around this. And there's a lot of sort of, unwillingness to change longstanding habits and beliefs. As I think about like my kids and the skills that I want to impart, resiliency is a big one. Adaptability, that's our secret as a species. Like, we're the most adaptable organism on planet Earth. We can thrive in the cold winters of Vermont with a meter and a half of snow out back. We can thrive in the sweltering heat of where you are right now, and everywhere in between. So I think the thing that we've got to teach our kids and remind ourselves is to lean into our ability to adapt to this uncertainty, and not hold on to the way things used to be, and be willing to accept. The faster that we can accept that things are going to change in a big way, and just be okay with that, I think the more likely we're going to succeed and thrive in whatever comes next, whatever it looks like.
And I think the word that you used around connection is so important. One of the reasons I started this podcast is there's a whole lot of tech marketing bros out there evangelizing AI, and AI is the only way. And it's a very get on board or die attitude, which is not very human. And, you know, when I'm in the coaching programs, I talk about the fact that we are actually the early adopters. I had a moment the other day, my brother was here for lunch. Now, I've been working in this space for just over 2 years now, and he is pretty anti-AI. And he was talking to me about training for a marathon in 12 months' time. And he was struggling to figure out what he needs to do today in order to be able to get to where he needs to be to do the marathon. And I said, oh, well, let's ask ChatGPT. He goes, I'm not doing AI. And I said, look, just let me show you. And we turned on voice mode and we had this conversation, and ChatGPT launched not only a monthly plan or a weekly plan, but a daily plan of what he could be doing right now to get ready for that marathon. And then I talked to him about, you know, if you fed your Strava data of your training schedule and what your body's doing during that, you would get a really personalized plan. And it just struck me that this is somebody who has an AI specialist in their family, and he just had his first ChatGPT moment. And so I think at that forefront where we are asking the questions, we are using the technology, we do need to remember that a lot of people have not even had that first moment yet. And I think, you know, that local and the connection and community and really looking at how we're going to navigate this together as humanity is a really important conversation. So I appreciate you raising those things here. So Ryan, as we start to wrap up, what are your final thoughts, or what would you like to leave people with today?
This is a conversation that I think we're just at the beginning. If this is an American baseball analogy, I'd say we're in the first inning of a 9-inning game. And there's a lot of runway ahead of us. And I think this is evolving very quickly. And it'll be interesting as we look back at these conversations and what ages well and what doesn't age well. I think back to, there's some new interesting news clips that date back to the late 1990s, early 2000s, where you have some news personalities that are talking about, hey, we've got this new thing called the internet and e-commerce. And it's just like, some of them just sound so ridiculous, just, you know, prophesizing on what's going to happen with it. So I don't pretend to have any of the answers, only the questions. But I will say this, I believe that there is a return to real movement taking shape in the world right now. And I think AI is forcing us to confront this. We've sort of been sleepwalking through life in many ways for the last decade or 2 decades. And now we're asking ourselves, what does it actually mean to be human? And how do I want to spend my life? Do I want to spend 8 hours a day, 5, 6, 7 days a week interacting with a robot? Or do I want to spend time with my hands in the dirt? Do I want to spend time training for a marathon IRL, in real life, in the real world? Do I want to be sitting down and eating real food? What does it actually mean to be real? And I believe we have a world right now that's dominated by algorithms, automation, and artificial everything. And there's a return to real movement taking shape in the world where people are yearning artisanal, they're yearning analog, and they're yearning authentic. And therein lies the opportunity. For those of us who are entrepreneurs, who are marketers, we can deliver what the world actually wants, what the world is actually craving. So going back to what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, I would lean in to that instinct that you may have to connect with your audience in a deep and meaningful way, because your audience is waiting for the Sunday brunch version of that orange juice. They're tired of the stuff that comes in a can. They're waiting for writing. They're waiting for a message that comes from a real life human being with a real beating heart. So lean into that, be that person for your audience. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity in front of us for those of us who embrace that.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for being so open and willing to go into some of those conversations today. I've really appreciated your time. How can people find you best? We'll include all of your links in the show notes, but where's the best place for people to find you?
The best place to find me is to go to thedigitalcontrarian.com. Every single week, as we talked about earlier in this interview, I write a real and raw personal newsletter that walks through the mistakes that I've made, the wisdom that I've gained, lessons that I'm learning, based on what I'm doing right now in my business. It's written by me personally. There's no AI, there's no team of writers. And to your point, Kate, earlier, it's a piece that I think forces you to think. And every week you'll walk away with some unconventional idea. If you're an entrepreneur who thinks differently, who maybe has carved your own path in life, I think there's some ideas that will really resonate with you in that piece. So that is thedigitalcontrarian.com.
Must read. Definitely the top of my must read list. So I really encourage everyone to go and sign up for that newsletter. Thank you again, Ryan. I've really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you for tuning in to the AI Grapple. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. We would love to hear your thoughts, so reach out with any questions or comments about the show. Until next time, keep grappling with AI and stay curious.